Hi and welcome to a new video. Welcome to the channel if you've not seen it before. Forgive me, I got another cold. I don't know where these colds come from. Cold and a cough. Now I've not done any vlogs for a few days because basically I've been solid on book work and I'm still not completed that book. It's the Static Caravan in the 1670s. And one of my problems is, well, it's not a problem really, is when I'm doing my research I find things out that I didn't know, and next thing I know, I go down to the rabbit hole, as they say. So then I come to a stop because something leads me to something else. I mean, it's something I need, but I just start to think, oh, I didn't know that bit. Oh, I didn't know they did this, or I didn't know you had that then. So it's all that sort of thing. Also, coming up in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to do a classic caravan from the 90s. And it's one that nobody will really have heard of. They're only a very small company, but I'll tell you more about that when I do the video. So I'm going to see the lady who's got it. She's had it restored, and they are pretty rare. They didn't make many, and I can remember going to see them new at the trade show and talking to the people that actually built them. Anyway, that's by the by. What I want to do today is it's a bit of a history lesson. Yes, it's one of Andy's history lessons. So stand to attention, or sit to attention, and listen in, because this is a video about a one-time big caravan manufacturer. A manufacturer now that, if you're a caravaner at least 30 plus years, maybe just over 30 years standing, you may have heard them. If you're one of 20 years, chances are you won't, unless you're into the classic caravan scene. And this company was a very formidable force in the UK market. In fact, they were at one time sort of hovering behind Caravans International, so Spry, Eccles Europa. And the fact is that they were quite popular. Not in quantity, they didn't produce the same sort of mass production as they did, but they were medium price touring range, and they really were a nice van. And my parents nearly bought one the first time we bought a caravan, and also some years later. Anyway, that manufacturer is a company called Thomson Caravans. Now, Thompson were a Scottish manufacturer, and their roots go back a long, long way to the start of the touring caravan. And it's a bit of a shame really, because Thompson get overlooked. It's always Eccles, which of course Eccles did play that part. And, they did sort of bring the commercial caravan idea to, the public in general. But up in Scotland, and we're talking at Falkirk, there was a little company who made, a little joinery company called Daniel Thompson, and he made fairground rides. Because in those days everything was made out of wood, so it was very high craftsmanship, and they also made coffins. Now, Thompson aren't the first caravan manufacturer who've had coffins related business. There was another company back in 1969 called Beverley Coachcraft in Hull, Beverley to be exact, and they were a coffin manufacturer, and they started making caravans. So there you go. And there's probably one or two more, but I can't think of those at the top of my head, but those are the main two. So Thompson started in the early 1900. They started to produce their first touring caravans in the 1920s. And what they did, they produced some very streamlined caravans at the day. More streamlined than what Eccles were doing back then. Thompson basically built up a very sort of slow reputation of building quality caravans. Don't forget, in that period of time, Scotland was considered a long, long way from the south of England. You know, there's obviously no media or anything like that, and anything was done was by magazines or whatever. And Thompson were a company who was sort of just pegging away there, producing caravans and just slowly building up a little network of dealers, but mainly north of the border. Come the war, they did war work, as Eccles did, of course, and Eccles made quite a lot of money out of that war work, but also they learnt a lot as well about production, and that was to be the same with Thompson as well. So by the 50s, the Thompsons, with the caravan boom coming in, Thompson were there. They produced residential models, they produced holiday caravans, and they produced tourers. And it would be towards the end of the 50s into the 60s that Thompson's really started to make an impact, and their dealerships have spread into the south of England as well. And also, not just south of England, they were exporting. The Falkirk factory in Scotland was actually becoming too small, and they expanded and they expanded and they expanded. And they had a factory in Belgium, and they also started producing them in Canada as well. So Thompson were a big outfit. They then also had the vision to buy some parks, and those parks were in Scotland. I'm going to put them on the video. I can't remember the top of the head which ones they were. I think Yellow Crag was one of them, and I believe they're there now. And Thompson's in the 70s, they bought those about 1969-70, big investment, and Thompson started to go and make static caravans again. And the idea was to, I presume, was to also put Thomson Caravans in onto the sites. The problem with the Thomson statics were they would never quite hit the mark. They never really were sort of, how can I put it, they were never popular, and they didn't make them very long. But anyway, that was what was happening, and Thompson then were a big manufacturer. Now, what they used to do was they used to actually insulate their caravans, not with glass fibre, not with tin foil like some manufacturers was doing. They used something called mineral wool, and it was something exclusive to Thompson, and they used that to do their insulation. And not only that, they were one of the last manufacturers of volume production to actually stop spray painting their own caravans. By about, I think, like 1972, they turned over to acrylic aluminium, which was pre-painted aluminium, and it was baked on. It was far more durable than being sprayed on in the factory. So sort of Thompson's up until that sort of period, you know, any length, any age, you know, paint peeling was not uncommon. But Thompson's were good, well-made caravans. My parents, when we started looking at Thompson's caravans in 1969, my mum and dad loved the Thompson Glen Nevis. Our local dealer sold out, and that's when he put us onto the eldest tornado. He said, this is your equivalent to the Thompson, but these are made in County Durham. They've only been going a few years of eldest, he said, but they're already getting a good, loyal following. And so Dad took the plunge. Not until some years later, again, when it came to changing my dad's Welton caravan, which he'd had a few years, about 5 or 6 years, which is a long time for me. Dad used to change them about every 2 or 3 years. And they looked at Thomson Glen Elg 13'6", 4/5 berth caravan. And that was about 1977. And I remember our dealer was Birmingham Caravan, which was still there. They were Eldis and Thompson at that particular time. And they said we went and had a look. And I remember we were looking at the Eldest Tornado, same layout as Thompson, virtually the same price. And I remember my mum and dad looking at 2 road reviews, one in Practical Caravan, I think the other one in Caravan magazine. And in the end, they said to me, "What do you think?" I went, "I think we're better off with the Eldest." I said, I'm sort of talking to one of the guys on the forecourt, and he was telling me lots of problems with Thompsons. And funnily enough, some friends of theirs had bought Thomson Glendale, which was a 2-berth, about that same time, actually, about 76, and they'd had a lot of problems with it, with leaking. So Thompsons were on a bit of a downturn, and unfortunately with Thompson is they'd never really progressed. They were always behind everybody. And of course you had people then by ABI, you had CI, and they started to lose their market share, which was a shame because they exported so many Thompsons, and they were, well, as I say, well-made vans. By the late 70s, by the very late 70s, the writing was on the wall. Sales were down, profits were taking a dip, and they basically, 1980, 81, 82, they started to try and update their caravans, keep the Thompson look. They put double glazed in and all bits and pieces in, but it was too late, and the shapes still look quite dated. Which is a good shame. And then I think it was about April 82, I think they went into liquidation. That should have been the end of the story there, but it wasn't, because what happened was some of the workers that had been at Thompson, and they'd employed a lot of people. I mean, they were probably making about several thousand caravans a year, which in those days was big guns. And they started another company called Fourth Valley Manufacturing, which was basically a Thompson. You thought they'd learned the lesson that things would have moved on, but they thought they'd have a fine. Within a couple of years, they'd also gone into liquidation. They're only a very small company, making a few Thompsons for the dedicated Thompson buyer. There was a Thompson Owners Club. I've got a car badge that I picked up some years ago, lovely, like new, for the Thompson owners. They had a Miss Thompson. Anyway, I'm going to cut this dribble now because I've been going on far too long. Yes, you're saying, shut up, get on with it. And we're going to do the video, and we're going to do the timeline. And anyway, see what you think. Hope you enjoy it. And just think about how this company was once one of the biggest manufacturers in the UK. It rivaled, I think it was like sort of Sprite, and Thompson were always like with Ettles and people like that. But unfortunately, they did go into liquidation. Some of the great companies that have been around have gone into liquidation. People like Berkeley Caravans, again, nobody will have heard of them now. They made sports cars. If you're a bit of a classic car fan, you'll know Berkeley cars. They made three-wheelers, put Villiers motorbike engine in, which was a two-stroke, and they had lots of problems, and it bankrupted the company. They used to make a caravan called the Argosy, which was a very cheap caravan, shaped almost like an egg, and it was made of offcuts of other Berkeley caravans of the main production. And what they did in those days, which you could do, I think they launched about 1952, and basically what they did, they had women assembling these caravans because they could pay women less money back in that day. Imagine. And that's what they did. So they kept the price down of the Argosy, which they made for a few years, and one or two still survive today. But that's what they did. They made them off offcuts, off the other vans, and then employed women to put them together because you have to pay them as much. How times have changed. Thank goodness it has as well. Anyway, I'm diversing yet again. So let's get on with the Thompson video and a history of Thomson Caravans. Tell me what you think.